Hey everybody, this one I do about every year. And I analyze all the movements across all the different cohorts, basically all the different wallet sizes across Bitcoin and how they've changed over the past 5 years. And that's going all the way back to 2020, which seems like a long time ago, but really it's not too long. However, this time around, there has been some dramatic shakeups out there in the world. And I'm going to dig into this today because people are always interested. Hey, Psych Experience and Steve and everybody else, and the moderators, TND Tessa, K8, and Sean Donnelly, thank you all for coming. But people always want to know where they stand on the food chain. At least I do. That's why I've been obsessed with this stuff since 2017. And I've got all the data and all the updates. So let's get into this story. This is called a Bitcoin Wealth Pyramid 2025. And thank you to everybody in Patreon as well. First of all, a quick reminder as to where we are going and why it's so important to even just have a little bit of Bitcoin. Because Ark Invest, their expected value for Bitcoin by the year 2030 approximately will be approximately 807,000. Their bull target by 2030 could be 1.48 million. And bear target 254, I think, will be somewhere in the middle, maybe even higher. Productive dude, thank you for coming. And yesterday's video is very funny because a lot of people are saying, where's the cohort video? Well, here it is. It's a day late. Apologies for that. It took a long time to crunch the numbers, and you'll see in a minute. So if somebody can get to one whole coin, and I've been talking about whole coinership since I began this channel, it could be worth $1.5 million. Imagine if you've got 10 of them, that could be worth $15 million, which is enough to do anything in many countries all over the world. So let's get into the story. Fun fact. This is also, people always get confused with Satoshis, but think of 100 million Satoshis per Bitcoin. And that is if Bitcoin goes to $1 million per coin, a Satoshi would equal 1 cent. By the way, I think I heard recently in the US, they're getting rid of the 1 cent coin. That would be the equivalent of the penny coin in the UK and the cent in the euro, etc. Anyway, but it means basically that Bitcoin is in a position to facilitate micro payments across the planet. And there are so many new stories coming up just in the past 2 weeks of how they believe, like people like heads of BlackRock, etc., how they believe Bitcoin could interrupt global payments. Anyway, let's move on to the story. A quick cohort refresher where you fit in. Now, I've taken the liberty of creating a couple of new categories here. Krill is having 0 Bitcoin to 0.1 Bitcoin, and Shrimp 0.1 Bitcoin to 1 Bitcoin. So if the moderator gets a chance, can they do a quick poll as to how many shrimp are in the audience, crab are in the audience, i.e. 1 to 10 Bitcoin, octopus 10 to 100. And of course, we'll assume there's no dolphins. So I'll repeat those again real quick. If we could do krill, shrimp, crab, and octopus. And I'll share the results of this at the end of the video to see exactly what the audience is. But remember, never publish how much Bitcoin you own because you will just make yourself a target. That's why the name you use online should always be hidden or secret. If you're watching Bitcoin videos, people might think you're interested in Bitcoin or have some. Anyway, let's get on with the story. This is a first chart of the day. It's going to be a lot of numbers here, but I'm going to try and just explain them simply as to what has happened and what has moved over time. And again, apologies for this little eye chart, and I have a lot of graphic charts as well. But what you can see here, over the past 5 years, the krill have been very stable over time. They've gone from, 0.0075 to about 0.0065 Bitcoin. Remember as well, they may have had bigger holdings, but the dollar value of Bitcoin is an awful lot higher in that time frame. So technically, it could be up in terms of overall value. Shrimp, 0.1 to 1 Bitcoin, have had a slight decline overall, going from about a 0.32 Bitcoin on average to 0.307. A steady but very gradual decrease. Maybe some people are moving towards ETFs, etc. We'll talk more about that later and the other big impact and what has dramatically changed. Crab, 1 to 10 Bitcoin. They have held an average 2.5 to 2.6 Bitcoin on average throughout the period. Octopus and fish, 10 to 100 Bitcoin. That's had a tiny modest decline from 32.3 to 32.1 Bitcoin, very, very steady Eddie. Dolphins, 100 to 1,000 Bitcoin. Monster move. We'll get into that as well in a minute. They are increasing their average bag. Shark also fluctuated slightly from 2,383 Bitcoin to about 2,275, down slightly. Small decrease in average holdings. And then whales. Whales have been quite violent. They grew from 22,170 to about 25,000. And then you got the humpback whales. These are the very, very large players, of which there are only 4. They have 100,000 to 1 million Bitcoin. They've gone from 163,000 to about 169,000. Up, down, all over the place. We'll talk about that violent swing. Now, a visual of what this actually looks like. It's kind of easier to track, kind of, at least for me, in terms of colors. If you imagine, these are the animals at the top, starting with krill, with humpback whale at the bottom. And on the right are the different time epochs that I've analyzed the data. So starting in January 2020, all the way to April 2025 in pink on the right. January 2020 is blue on the left. And you can see how the sizes grow and get smaller over time. So if you look at, for example, the big difference in holdings for these different groups, you'll notice if you look at where I put the green arrow, because it is an eye chart, you'll see here Dolphin have changed dramatically. They've never held so much as they have right now. And the question is, why? What's going on with these folks? We'll get into that with another chart right now. Here you can see the visual, kind of like a Sankey curve almost, of the changes of holdings for the different cohorts over time. And here kind of has a little bit of a different picture. So humpback whales started at 491K on average, dipped to 141, 450, and then grew to 678, 860 by April 2025. Obviously, the whales sometimes sell hard in the bear market, and that is the blue star line. Then the whale, not the humpback whale, but the whale, begins at 1.66 million to 1.7 million, and then up to 2.24 million by April 2025. So a slow, steady, and then a big increase after 2023. Then you got shark, the orange line, 4.79 million, peaks at 5.46, and then dips to 3.86 and ends at 4.55 right now, million by today. So this is kind of very volatile, a significant peak and subsequent decline before recovering. Dolphin, this is big, begins at 3.5 million and grows to 4.3 million. What's going on with the dolphins? We'll try to figure that out too. And it shows very consistent growth over time. They are stacking. And remember, dolphins are big bag holders. A quick reminder of what a dolphin is. Let me pull this back. Cohort Refresher. Dolphins are 100 to 1,000 Bitcoins. They are growing the fastest. This is going to become a little bit of a dolphin show today, I'm afraid. But we'll get into the reasoning behind why all of that is there. And then we have... what else? The crabs, again, 2.3 million to about 2.14 million. Slight decline over the period. Crabfish, the red line, 2.35 million to about 2.29 million. Pretty steady with minor fluctuations. So that's kind of the score so far. Let's talk about other stuff. This is the average bag by cohort since January 2020. So if you imagine, say, a shrimp or a dolphin or a shark, how much on average do they hold within that range? Again, if you have an animal like you've got, well, I'll pull up a good example, a crab, between 1 Bitcoin, a whole coiner, and 10 Bitcoin. What is the average holding for that bag holder? Well, it's an interesting story. Here you can see I've calculated it all. The changes, not only the average bag, but the changes in the average bag have been kind of stunning too. So krill, they began with about 0.007 Bitcoin and have ended with 0.0065 Bitcoin. So it has been going down, but the value of Bitcoin's gone up an awful lot in that time frame. So the dollar value of the bag has also gone up a lot. So remember, if you are a krill out there, again, every little bit counts. And then you have the shrimp. That's gone from about 0.32 Bitcoin, peaking down, and it's declined now to about 0.307. So again, it's got smaller, a modest decrease of about 4%. The krill fell by about 13% in their average holding. The crab remains steady at 2.5 Bitcoin, very steady. But if you calculate the percentiles, it's a tiny decrease of about 3%. Octopus fish, the 10 to 100 Bitcoin, it started at 32.3 Bitcoin. Average bag size ends at 32.1. So the octopus and fish have been super steady. Only a slight decrease of 0.6%. Dolphins, 100 to 1,000 Bitcoin. All right. These are the super rich people or treasuries. Somebody. BD and DBF, good to see you all. Thank you for coming. This is interesting. The Dolphins, 100 to 1,000 Bitcoin, started at 253 Bitcoin. Now it's 287.5 Bitcoin by April 2025. They may not sound like a lot, but that is a lot of delta. That's nearly 30 extra Bitcoin per dolphin that's out there. So they have been the biggest stackers out there. I haven't seen a swing this big, and I've been doing this for 5 years. Big increase, 13% in bag size. Whales, 1,000 to 10,000 Bitcoin. It decreased by about 9%, kind of small. And then your humpback whales, slight increase in the starting point, up about 3.5%, but very volatile. They start about 163 Bitcoin and end about 169,715 Bitcoin in the current April 2025 analysis. So let's start looking at what these things mean in terms of dollar values and how many addresses there are per animal. This is where it gets kind of crazy. And it shows you that just like everything else in the world, the winners take most. There's always heavy wealth concentration among the top percentiles. But here you can see there are 49 million krills out there. 49 million with very small bag sizes. Shrimp, 3.48 million shrimp. Crab, 842,000. Octopus fish, 134,000. Dolphins, 16,000. Sharks, 2,000. Whales, 89. And humpback whales, 4,000. Remember, the humpback whales are those with 100,000 to 1 million Bitcoin. And that is a bonkers set. Now, if you put things in a little graphical format, a little pie chart, this is where it gets a bit nutty. The cohort share of address, even though krill own 92% of the Bitcoin addresses, they only own 1.6% of the supply. And you'll see how much the top 18,000 wallets own in a second. Stay tuned for that. That is the top, 0.03% of wallets, how much they own of all of Bitcoin. It is quite startling. And let's go to the two as well, is the cohort share of Bitcoin, how much each group has. As I mentioned, nearly 50 million krill have 319,000 Bitcoin. Not to be sniffed at, that's a lot, but it's nearly 50 million addresses. Shrimp, 1.07 million Bitcoin. Crab, 2.09 million. Octopus fish, 4.3 million. Dolphin, 4.58 million. Shark, 4.55 million. By the way, this is the first time I've done this analysis where you have 3 cohorts that are super tight together. The octopus fish, dolphin, and shark. They all have nearly 4.5 million or just over 4.5 million. These 3 cohorts own the lion's share of Bitcoin. Bizarre. We'll break that down in a second too. Whales, 2.24 million, and humpback whales, 678,000. Now, another interesting chart, because this is a chart where things have dramatically changed as well. And it took me very much by surprise. I had to triple check, quadruple check the numbers. For the first time ever, the dolphins rule the roost here, ladies and gentlemen. Exciting new numbers, at least exciting to me. I hope you all find this exciting as well. I'm a bit of a nerd here, but you can see the dolphins, that is orange, own 23.1% of all Bitcoin. Number 2 are sharks. They just got displaced down to 22.9%. Remember, the dolphins have been stacking aggressively. The sharks have been letting go a little bit. Octopus fish, 21.7%. You add those all together, basically over 65%, 2/3 of all Bitcoin is held by these 3 cohorts. People talk about the whales. The whales are no longer in control. We'll talk a bit more about the actual conclusion as to why that is in a minute. Also, average Bitcoin bag holding. So if you are a crab or a shrimp or a krill or an octopus or a fish, what is the average holding per these bag holders? This gets kind of interesting. You can see here the average krill owns 0.0007 Bitcoin, average shrimp 0.307. So if you want to be a shrimp, you want to be bigger than the rest of the shrimp. That means you need to own over 0.307 Bitcoin. Crabs fallen slightly to 2.481 Bitcoin. That was a little higher before last time I did this. Octopus and shrimp on average have about 32 Bitcoin. And dolphins, 288 Bitcoin on average. Big sharks, 2,275. Whales, 25,000. And humpback whales, very large bags indeed, 169,715 Bitcoin. But let's talk about this one too. I know you ask, what is the average Bitcoin bag holding? What does it look like in the visual? And there you can see, it looks like the whales and the humpback whales have it all, but there's so few of those wallets. Again, think dolphins, think fish, think sharks. They own a lot because they have the largest size wallets across the largest number of addresses. Now, a quick reminder as well of the average wealth bag size by cohort today. Remember, flash forward to Cathie Wood, and if our numbers are in the ballpark by 2030, this could be significant. And we do expect more distribution of Bitcoin over time as it becomes more popular. We're still very young. Remember, gold's been around for 5,000 years. Bitcoin's been around for 15, not very long. But here, the average dollar value of each cohort today is the krill on average have $554 in Bitcoin, shrimp $26,135, crab $211,000, octopus fish have 2.73 million in Bitcoin, dolphins 24.4 million in Bitcoin. These are big players. That's average bag size in dollar terms today. Sharks, so $193 million. Whales, 2.13 billion. And of course, humpback whales, 14.4 billion. These are super, super big numbers. But again, there's very few of them. There's only 4 humpback whales out there, ladies and gentlemen. All right, let's get into the conclusion, because this is where I try and figure out what has happened since I've been doing this. And all of these videos are turned into Substacks for, I think, about 9 cents a day. Everything's recapping. In fact, I'm going to write an interesting one later today myself. But here are some key conclusions as to what has actually happened. And again, I don't know exactly what's happening in all the different wallets, but I can tell you what I see happening. And Bitcoin ownership is shifting for sure. It's shifting ownership in a big way, and we'll get to how in a second. I do believe we are moving from early large holders, whales and sharks, to mid-sized institutions. I think the dolphins are institutions, ladies and gentlemen, and they are a rapid growing base of the small retail, and also the rapid growing base of the small retail investors like krill and shrimp. And this, again, signals a broader and more decentralized distribution. The dolphins, again, 100 to 1,000 Bitcoin, have become the most aggressive accumulators, gaining over 1 million Bitcoin, up 28% since 2020. And that's a dramatic surge in 2025. The question is, why? What's going on? And I think this reflects an increased confidence in strategic positioning by mid-sized institutions. They're not all publishing what they're doing because they understand game theory, but they're doing it. You only hear about some public companies, but again, as I've been saying for nearly a year now, treasuries are the game for this bull run. Retail cohorts, krill and shrimp, have shown the strongest address growth, up 88% and 71% respectively. However, that's all part of grassroots adoption, emerging markets. People need a way of storing cash, and they're using Bitcoin for that. And then the crabs, 1 to 10 Bitcoin, have accumulated steadily until 2023, but then their momentum has stalled, suggesting profit taking or reduced appetite, or maybe the 1 to 10 crab Bitcoin holders have YOLO'd into meme coins. I don't know, or layer ones, or AI. I don't know what they've done. But the crabs were always growing for years and years, and all of a sudden they've stalled. Then you have the kind of professional traders and OTC desks, the octopus fish, and they've maintained very stable holdings, indicating they probably have a very neutral stance and a focus on liquidity and trading rather than directional bets, because they have been super steady over time. Then you got your legacy whales and sharks. They've reduced their exposure by 4 to 5%, reflecting profit-taking, diversification, life cycle chips, regulatory-driven portfolio adjustments, maybe moving to ETFs, I'm not sure. But they have changed, and the largest entities, public humpback whales, are probably exchanges, ETFs. They've remained highly concentrated and volatile, and have increased their holdings by 38%, possibly due to institutional restructuring and ETF inflows. But overall, the market's maturing, a very good sign. Institutional participation is diversifying, retail adoption is accelerating, and the balance of power is shifting towards these new treasury type companies. And I believe, my gut tells me, dolphins are those. They are private companies, they are small public companies, and they are stacking Bitcoin. And we only know of 79 of them. There's probably hundreds more. Another view of what this looks like is a quick display here. You can see all the different numbers here if you want to take the time. The deltas in a very simple table format. Delta Bitcoin held, delta addresses, delta growth rate for the different institutions for people who want to really nerd out. But the big thing I'd like to point out again is dolphins and whales. Whales have probably increased due to ETFs. Dolphins have increased due to the actual treasuries strategy that's out there. Finally, well, not finally, a couple more points too. The cost to enter the wealth pyramid. I love doing these wealth pyramids. I always like to know where I stand, and I hope you do too. Have a plan, set a goal. Say for example, you want to be in the top 1% of Bitcoin holders. Today, that's going to cost you a lot. That's going to cost you $280,500. During the bear, this is bizarre. During the bear, you could have got here for 40 grand. And that was only November 2022, not too long ago. But make a plan. Stack in the bear. Billions are made in the bear. To be in the top 0.1% of all Bitcoin holders, you need to have $1.827 million of Bitcoin, more than 21.5. There has been a change to be in the top 1%, by the way. It was to have 3.5 Bitcoin. Now you only need 3.3 Bitcoin to be in the top 1%, because a lot of concentration has happened at the higher levels. Okay, so you need less Bitcoin now than you did last time I did this to be in the top 1%. And to be in the top 5%, you just need more than 0.133 Bitcoin. That'll cost you about $11,300 today. These values have actually gone down since last time I did this last year, because the market's dipping. Now, the good news as well, another quick point of how early we are. There are 53 million addresses, and there's 8 billion people on Earth. Therefore, you could argue if each human only had one address, that would be 0.66 penetration on the planet. But of course, most people, many Bitcoin holders have like 10 plus addresses. So that's skewed. But anyway, just remember, we are still very early, despite this very cool graphic. And if Bitcoin was evenly distributed across the planet to all the people, the 19.7 million Satoshis across 8 billion people, each human would have 247,000 Satoshis. That's about 0.0025 Bitcoin per person, and that would cost you 212 today. So if you have a nephew or a grandson or a niece or something, and you want to give them a gift, buy them $212 a Bitcoin, teach them how to use a wallet, and then they'll have more than the average person on Earth. A lot more. Anyway, if it's evenly distributed, of course. And remember, this is where we are in terms of Bitcoin adoption. We are still so early. If you compare them to iPhones, or basically Nokia 8840 time zone, if anybody is old enough to remember those phones, we have a long way to go. A lot more adoption is coming. Thank you all for coming. Hope you enjoyed the show. Thank you once again to the mods in the chat. Big hugs to everybody. TND Tesla, Sean Donnelly, K8. Oh, did we get a result from the survey? Hold on a second. This will be interesting. Did we do a survey? Yeah. Where is the survey? Hold on a second. I got the survey. I got the survey results, everybody. This is so cool. I love this. Love this live survey. What did I just do? I zoomed into it. Okay. We had over 1,000 votes so far. 18% are krill. I'm going to bring this back to show the animals. This is great live TV. My throat's so dry. Let me pull up the animals again as a refresher of where we are. Here we are. Okay, we just did the 4 krill, shrimp, crab, and octopus. We have out there, ladies and gentlemen, we have 18% krill, 27% shrimp, 43% crab, wow, and 12% octopus. Wow, 12% of you have a lot of Bitcoin. That's the bonkers. Anyway, well done, everybody. You are early. You are set. But may I remind you one more time, keep your security locked down. Thank you for all the love. Thank you for being here, everybody. Hope you enjoyed the show. I do this once a year, and that was, I think, the 5th or 6th one I've done. So I might, if there are more big changes I see in 4 to 6 months, I will do it again. Let me know if you like it. A lot of work goes into these things. Hit the like if you do. And let's get the word out there so people can build a plan and set up a target for their wealth accumulation plan. Thank you all for coming. Have a good night.